Let me just share it with you now. I've started to last yes 1 week ago. I shared with you this personal goals, pressure recordings, and achievements sheet, and this is something we've used in our programs in the past. And it's just an encouragement for those of you who are ready. Not everybody is ready to make changes necessarily, but we know that many people who come to a program like this, they want to make changes, they want to improve things. And you can't necessarily, pick everything that we talk about. A lot of it is knowledge building and then beginning to, make progress in your own lifestyle. And so I just encourage people to pick a couple goals. If you're ambitious, pick a couple more and see if you can accomplish it in your life during this program. It's much more effective if you make it, like we said, a SMART goal. SMART is an acronym. It's been a long-standing thing in many different areas of academics or business and so on to get goals done. And so SMART stands for specific, so something very specific when it comes to exercise or diet and so forth. Measurable, so making a concrete criteria where if you've achieved it or not. Action oriented, so it's very focused on the actual process rather than just theoretical types of things. It's realistic, it's something that you think you can actually do. If you're sedentary, for example, and you think you're going to get up and exercise 7 days a week for an hour, well, that might be a little too ambitious to start, and you might not be able to achieve it. And then, of course, time phase, think about the time. I want to do this for the next 30 days or the next 20 days or whatever to be able to attempt it. And then the other handout I want to share with you is just the one that we have available to try to remember um, what the various. Let me see if I can get that up again. Oh, that came back as the other one. Let's see. Hopefully this will come up here. I'm going to turn this one off. Maybe it's just the whole program. There we go. Okay. So it pulls up the whole preview program. Okay. So this is just a list of the various things that we recommend in this program that we know improves blood pressure. And we're going to cover a couple more of them today. So it's a long list. Please don't think that this is what you have to get done during this program. But this gives you a comprehensive, pretty comprehensive, list that you could work on over a period of many months to see if you can accomplish it. To give you the opportunity to you know, naturally improve your blood pressure. If you're on blood pressure medicine, let's see if you can reduce doses over time, or even getting off a dose or two, medicine or two. So that's excellent. And the second page here just gives you a little more detail about each thing. So, for example, number one is eat more greens. Okay, great. But what does that mean? So, you get a little more detail. If you look down on the second page, it talks about eat 1 cup or more of greens at least 3 days per week. So it gives you a specific kind of goal to go after. You don't have to pick that. You can pick what you think you can accomplish. For example, if you're focused on greens, but that will improve your blood pressure. All right, so that's an important sheet, and hopefully you all have access to that. And it's I understand it's on the website, although I haven't checked personally. Is it on the website? I think it is, right? Yeah. Pastor Chris has given me the thumbs up, and so we're excited about that. And of course, I put my background. I don't know if anybody can knows where that is. You probably wouldn't know because it's just a beautiful spot just north of Lincoln City, and it's a wonderful little hike right on the Oregon coast, and that's where I've lived for the last 8 years, and now we've been here for a couple of years, and yeah, getting out into nature is just absolutely a wonderful thing for your blood pressure. And so Pierre mentioned that earlier, so I thought I'd just change my background for a second. I don't know which background you want to look at while I'm talking. Maybe this isn't as attractive a background, but anyways, let's get into the talk and let's see if I can find it here, and we'll get things going. So we're gonna go ahead and start the PowerPoint now. And again, a lot of this is from our book, which we're happy to make available to you as we can. I don't have any big burden to make a lot of money on it or anything. We're just trying to get the word out, and we run it as a ministry, and most of the money for this book goes to just getting the word out, and it's not a money maker for me. So it's a good thing, and so take this book and share it, and and if you come when we can see you in person, we'll go ahead and give you a copy. I got about 40 copies sitting at home waiting for you. All right, so we're going through the no pressure, acronym, and we've covered several of them already. Today we're going to cover, herbs and supplements, and we're going to cover exercise and rest. So I don't know if we can get through it. We're going to do our best and try to move quickly here. So last time I realized I had left this slide out, and this is supplements that can raise blood pressure. Obviously, we're going to look at supplements that can improve blood pressure today. But if you're on supplements or herbals, and you like more of the natural side of it, there are herbals that have risk. And here's a partial list: licorice, kava, ma huang, also known as ephedra. Guarana is popular in South America. Cola nut, of course, the infamous cola nut, from which cocaine comes, and so on. Coca-Cola is named after the cola nut. Ginseng, yohimbine. These are supplements, the herbals that can cause trouble. In fact, I had a patient who was 18 years old who was admitted into the ICU back when I was in Southern California, and she had a horrible, pulmonary hypertension, lung condition, and she was on a ventilator, and it was all because she was taking ephedra, and she was in perfect health otherwise. And we had her on the ventilator for weeks, and she eventually passed away. We could not save her life. And so sometimes these herbals can have risk, and they need to be thought of as something that does have a drug effect sometimes, and can have some risk. So it's not just totally, completely risk-free. All right, so some of the other ones that, other than the list originally listed, Arnica, that's often used for wounds and bruises and so on. Bitter orange, there's ginkgo, senna, which is a popular one in pharmacies for constipation. People don't realize that it can raise blood pressure some. And then St. John's wort is an antidepressant kind of herbal, and that can raise blood pressure. And yohimbine is for erectile dysfunction and so on. All right, so yohimbine, here's just an example of some of the risks here. There's a study published, and they looked at the California poison control system, and there were 238 adverse drug events related to yohimbine, and it was hypertension was a portion, agitation, tachycardia, gastrointestinal distress. So again, these are not totally risk-free things. Things with tyramine in it. So here's another piece of the blood pressure raising story. Cheeses, wines, other rich foods like that. Tyramine can raise blood pressure and even has kind of a confusional effect on your brain a little bit. And so it's something to look at. And it may be a piece of the story there with the stress hormones, and tyramine has a stress hormone piece to it. So anyways, that's just a little summary there, and I'm sorry, I should have covered that last week and just left those out. All right, so are natural pills better than medications? Well, I think that they should be looked at first before medications, if at all possible, because they have less risk, generally speaking, than medications do. And but they're not substitutes for lifestyle therapy. Lifestyle therapy should be the mainstay of blood pressure control, blood pressure improvement, and it shouldn't be the last thing that you just sort of, leave off to the side. It should be the main thing. It should be the thing that's talked about the most, the thing that's worked on the most when it comes to hypertension. And the other things should be kind of side things or helpers when lifestyle is just not getting you there. um, you know, may have effects that aid in lifestyle goals. Supplements can help with appetite sometimes, can help you to lose weight, for example, can decrease dependence on medications. So this is a great thing. Maybe you can lower the dose a little bit with help from a supplement. So we like to use it for that reason, help with fatigue and so on as well. And then adjunctive effects, there's a number of herbals that have multiple different effects on the body, and they usually have multiple different active components within them. And that's part of the reason why it's safer, is because it comes at your body in multiple ways, as opposed to the drug that just hits one enzyme in your body, for example, and has to do all the work in that one enzyme, when you have thousands and thousands of different enzymes in your body that are working in harmony to keep you running. All right, so understanding some of the pieces of the herbal whenever possible. We don't always know everything about it. Address the primary factors. Um, you know, of the hypertension issue and what's going on there, and then use non-toxic therapies first whenever possible, and so on. Um, so we covered that. So the other risk with herbals is that sometimes they have a drug interaction. So if you're on medications, there are some risks there, and that needs to be looked up. So if you're starting an herbal, or you're thinking about starting an herbal that we talk about today, and you're on medications, you know, take some time, either yourself or physicians are very good at this. They're used to looking these things up, and you can look and see if there's any risks to what we're talking about and the particular medication that you are thinking about trying. Here are a few that I just have in the list here that are very common, in terms of interactions. So ginkgo, St. John's wort, ginseng, garlic, kava. Obviously, these aren't necessarily going to improve your blood pressure per se, but they're just examples of you know herbals that have an interaction. And so interactions are common with herbals and medications, and so there needs to be thought about, if you're on medications. All right, and some herbals can affect a medication that has a narrow therapeutic window. So, if you're on a blood thinner, let's say you're on warfarin, and then you take a herbal that has blood thinning effects, you know, um, that could throw your warfarin blood thinning story into a problem, and then you have some bleeding and so on, and we don't want to have those kinds of risks. So, an omega-3 is an example of that. It has a slight blood thinning effect. So you need to think about that if you're on a blood thinner. All right, so here's the medication with a narrow therapeutic window on the left there. You get the desirable effects from the medication. It's just a very relatively small therapeutic window that you got in terms of the dose that you're allowed to take. And if you don't take enough, then it's not going to have an effect. And if you take too much, then it's going to be toxic. And so you have to find just that right dose. And whereas some medications have a wide therapeutic window and are less toxic. So that's something to think about. So let's turn to supplements that help high blood pressure now. So what supplements help high blood pressure? So we're not going to look at all of them. There's quite a few that have been looked at. We're just going to look at some of the leading ones here that are most commonly looked at. So here's a study that was produced in the medical literature from a naturopathic practice, and these were the most common supplements that patients were taking for high blood pressure. So we can look at a couple of these and see, are they helpful, and do they make any difference with that. So let's take a look at omega-3 fatty acids. So omega-3 fatty acids, there's three major kind of ones that we have access to. Alpha-linolenic acid, also known as ALA, these long names. EPA is icosapentaenoate. No, I can't even say it. Maybe one of you can say it. Icosa, I can't even say it, pentanoic acid. Docos, we just can't even say it, so we just say EPA, DHA, okay. Hexanoic acid, okay, there you go. That's hard. I've practiced it many times through the years, and I still can't say it. All right, so EPA, DHA, ALA, these are the words, the acronyms you're going to use for omega-3 fatty acids. Omega-3 fatty acids are basically like vitamins that are in the fat kingdom. They are healthy fats. They are the fats that help reduce inflammation in your body. They do a lot of things. And so let's take a look at blood pressure effects so here's kind of the summary, some of the summary statements from this one meta-analysis. Hypertension induced by omega-3 unsaturated fatty acid deficiency. Okay, so here we got a lot of Americans have deficiencies in omega-3 because they just aren't eating it. Is alleviated by alpha-linolenic acid. So that's one type of the omega-3, regardless of dietary source. Omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acid deficiency, particularly during the prenatal period, can cause hypertension in later life. Interesting. In an animal model, researchers demonstrated that dietary alpha-linolenic acid, canola oil, or flaxseed oil given to mothers prior to mating and to offspring after birth could prevent the development of hypertension in the offspring. So this is one underlying factor that puts people at risk later, potentially for high blood pressure. And if you have an omega-3 fatty acid deficiency, you are going to, potentially have high blood pressure from that. You can correct that. It's very easy to do. So offspring on the diet of plant sources of omega-3 also had lower body weight. Adiposity means how overweight you are, and food intake. All right, so they did better. They did better with their weight and so on when they're on omega-3 fats. And you would think, well, if you're on more fat, then that's just make it worse. But actually, it makes it better because it's helping your body function better, and it's improving the inflammation. All right, so there's a lot of things that omega-3s fatty acids do. They decrease your risk of heart-related death and cardiac events, heart attacks. They improve your triglyceride levels. They reduce blood pressure, of course. They improve joint pain and give you less need of medicines like ibuprofen and naproxen and Aleve and all these aspirin, all these medicines that you're trying to take for your joints. They possibly might help dementia and memory. They definitely improve mood and reduce your risk of depression. And so omega-3 has a lot of different benefits. And definitely, if you're not getting enough of omega-3, it's going to be harming you. All right, so we recommend that you, generally speaking, you prioritize dietary sources whenever possible, and then you can take a supplement to help it out. Fish consumption has been a major piece of omega-3 intake, and we've had a lot of issues with fish getting increasingly contaminated. We mentioned that last time with dioxins and just the industrialization of especially America and China, and just causing a lot of toxic effects on our countries, and just leading to fish having a lot more problems with mercury in them and so on. And it seems like over time the effects of fish in the medical literature, I've seen it with my own eyes, the effects of the benefits of fish have been waning. And now we're even seeing that fish is on the side of elevating blood pressure in some of the most recent meta-analyses, which I showed you 2 weeks ago. All right, so enough fish to, globally, we don't have enough fish to sustainably meet the omega-3 requirements of the world. So that's one thing. And then also the toxic exposures are important. Omega-3 sources should be refrigerated. And if you take a supplement, which, I actually will take a supplement of the EPA, DHA, most of the time, just to make sure I'm getting enough there. There's been some debate over whether the ALA, which is the kind you get in plants, converts efficiently enough all the time. And so you can take a plant source of the EPA, DHA as well, which is usually from seaweed. All right, an algal source. All right, so here's a list of omega-3 sources that are widely available. So My favorite one is ground flaxseed, 1 tablespoon. You get a nice decent dose of omega-3. It's really good, 1,500 milligrams. But there's a lot of other sources. You don't have to do ground flaxseed if you don't want to. You got the walnuts, you got chia seeds, flaxseed oil. There's other sources that have less amounts, but do have a little bit. And then of course you've got some really good sources of the fish. But again, we're recommending that you think twice about that in your diet. All right, so that was omega-3. Let's take a look at magnesium. So magnesium is an outstanding, awesome mineral. I mean, it's absolutely essential to blood pressure and your health in general. I mean, it's got 300 enzyme systems they've connected magnesium to, that if the magnesium's not there, the enzyme just doesn't work well. And so the magnesium is just intimately involved with this. I mean, it's a huge piece of migraine headache control. It's related to lower risk of heart disease, sudden death. I mean, the number one thing we do in the hospital, or one of the top things we do in the hospital, when we think someone's about to have a big arrhythmia problem, we give them magnesium right in their IV. And we do it almost every time. And it really helps to minimize the risk of the arrhythmias and so on. So, it's a very important heart mineral, and it helps your blood pressure. So it's excellent. If you eat more of that magnesium, you get less diabetes. It helps your bones, um, and it's great for your nerves as well. So magnesium is something that you want to have adequate intake of. Of course, we talked about it earlier. Magnesium is rich in green leafy vegetables. It's rich in legumes, and it's rich in nuts and seeds. So that should be the mainstay of your magnesium intake. But if you're still having trouble with your blood pressure, despite doing that and many of the other things that we're talking about, and you're still having issues, then it's probably worth a try with the magnesium supplement. So, for example, here's a review of this kind of effort. So they looked at all the studies that we had on magnesium and blood pressure, and they found about a 3 to 4 point reduction and a 2 to 3 point reduction systolic and diastolic there. So it made a difference. It's not massive, but if you're still having issues, it's one more thing to add on. All right, and so I don't have any big issues. Obviously, the magnesium can sometimes cause some diarrhea if you're taking too massive a dose. I mean, we use it for constipation all the time, so you got to think about that as well. Okay, let's look at coenzyme Q10. Coenzyme Q10 has actually a number of clinical trials now, several randomized trials, and it's growing all the time. And generally speaking, most of the data show that there's a benefit with coenzyme Q10, and we'll look at some of it here. The randomized trials, there were 3 of them, and then there was 8 open label trials, which means they weren't randomized, but they were still trials. And so you can see, if you look at the systolic blood pressure before and after, so that's this, 167 to 151. So that in the randomized trials, you got a good drop with coenzyme Q10. That's like 15 points in the randomized trials, 3 of them. And in the open label, you have the same kinds of effects. And the diastolic, you have, very nice improvements. I mean, these are quite strong, and it looks like probably, even though there's been a few trials that haven't shown that level of improvement, probably it's something worth trying, and it's well tolerated overall. In one trial, they did, if the dose was high enough, they were having, some people do have some gastrointestinal effects with it, but most people do pretty well with it in my experience, just clinically. All right, so it's worth a try, and it's going to have a good benefit for you, hopefully, and not give you too many big issues with side effects. Occasionally people had some stomach changes, and part of that has to do with the absorption. So Coenzyme Q10 is not normally absorbed that well, and so they have to give pretty high doses. Like, for example, we usually give like 400 milligrams a day, 200 milligrams twice a day, for example, for coenzyme Q10, the traditional kind. But there's another kind that's well absorbed. You can lower the dose quite a lot, and going to give you less symptoms in your stomach, and, because of the dosing. And so you only have to give 100 milligrams if you give a ubiquinol. So ubiquinol, Ubiquinol, ubiquinol is coenzyme Q10 in a slightly different altered form that is well absorbed, and it's 100 milligrams twice a day is a typical dose. All right, so there's a bunch of doses that you can use. Some of the earlier trials used lower doses. More recent studies were using higher doses, and they realized these higher doses had more effect. And so you can check the blood levels even to see if the person's getting enough, and see if it's making a difference. So it's an excellent option because we do have blood testing to help see if it's making a difference. All right, so the other issue with or the other help that we have with coenzyme Q10 is that it corrects what statins do in a harmful way. So when you take a statin, which is a cholesterol lowering medicine, Lipitor and lovastatin, and there's many of them. What it does is it makes you deficient in coenzyme Q10 because of the way it blocks cholesterol, and your body needs cholesterol to make coenzyme Q10, and so you have to correct that ideally. And so if you're on a statin, or you should take coenzyme Q10 anyways to correct that deficiency. All right, so it helps with that. And then, so that's good. So coenzyme Q10 seems to have, so especially in some of the earlier trials, had quite a significant effect. Even some of the later trials that were a little more carefully done had benefits. So I do recommend it, and I think it's worth a try. All right, and then we're going to look at probiotics really quick. So probiotics have some data. 540 patients during in this review. In 9 studies, and it had a mild effect, 3.5 points, systolic 2.3 points, 2.4 points, diastolic in improvement. So people will often take probiotics for other reasons. Maybe they've had antibiotics recently, or maybe they're having diarrhea issues. They might take it for those reasons, and some people will try it for blood pressure, to try to get help occasionally. And then L-Arginine is a popular one, and it also helps your blood pressure. So L-Arginine, so here's a study that looked at a couple different doses. So 3 grams a day of L-Arginine, 6 grams a day of L-Arginine, and 6 grams a day had a pretty good effect. L-Arginine is just an amino acid. It's something that you can certainly take if you have issues with cold sores on your lips. You do need to be careful with L-Arginine because herpes simplex virus is, you shouldn't take L-Arginine if you have herpes simplex issues with like your lips or whatever. Okay, so but other than that, L-Arginine is a good idea for many people who are trying to get their blood pressure down. So here you can see there's like a 7-point systolic, 5-point diastolic benefit, which is pretty good. I mean, some medications don't even do that well. And then 3 grams a day, you got a lesser effect. So that's something to look at. And that was, again, just one trial, and we need more data on that. And then another interesting option is hibiscus tea. I mean, hey, I love hibiscus tea. It's one of the most flavorful teas that I've ever tasted. And my wife makes it a wonderful hibiscus tea. You just come on over anytime, and we'll get you some hibiscus tea. And it's excellent. It has some good effects in terms of lowering the blood pressure, about 7.5 points on the systolic, 3.5 points on the diastolic. This was in 5 studies with 225 subjects. So obviously need more research, but hey, it's safe. I mean, it's a powerful antioxidant in your body. It's healthy. and it's going to be a great option. The only major risk with hibiscus tea is that you want to rinse out your mouth after you take it. So if you're taking it clinically like 3 times a day to help your blood pressure, which is the dose that was done in all these studies, 3 cups a day, you need to kind of clean your mouth, wash your mouth after you use it, because if you use hibiscus tea habitually for a period of time, it will kind of color your teeth. So it has some components in it that have a teeth coloring effect. So that's the major risk. All right, and then we've got let's move on to exercise. So exercise is a great option for improving your blood pressure. And so let's take a quick look at exercise. All right, so exercise and high blood pressure. What are the effects? I mean, you probably could have told me this slide, but the studies show that it improves blood pressure about 4 to 6 points on the systolic scale, and diastolic is about 3 points. Those people who are younger seem to be able to have quicker and more pronounced effects, but that doesn't mean that older folks shouldn't do it. They definitely need to. There's just so many benefits, and blood pressure is just one of them of exercise. All right, so there's here's an example of a study, how much exercise is required to reduce blood pressure in essential hypertensives, and dose response study. So what they did was they had people over 8 weeks exercise a little bit or exercise a lot, and they divided them into 4 different groups. And any exercise at all improved your blood pressure. So let me help you understand this slide. So here's how much your blood pressure decreased over here. And here are the 4 groups right here. Oh, I'm sorry, this is maybe a little bit confusing, but here are the 4 groups, and here's the control group right here, 30 to 60 minutes a week, that's right here, 61 to 90 minutes a week of exercise, that's right here, 91 to 120, that's here, and this one is over 120 minutes a week that they exercise. And so basically, if you did nothing, you didn't get any blood pressure improvements. But if you did 30 to 60 minutes of exercise a week, then you got almost 7 point improvement. And then if you did 61 to 90 minutes of exercise a week, you got 12 points of improvement. And then they didn't get any statistically significant more benefit. That's what these little stars are. But it still seemed to improve some as you increased. And so the benefit is large. The benefit is very large once you get up to about 90 minutes of exercise a week. But once you do more than 90 minutes, you're not getting any further benefits. So that's not really that much. I mean, that's like 30 minutes of walking, for example, 3 days a week. That's not really that hard to do. It's very doable, and and you'll get maximal benefits already at that level. So you get most of your benefit when you first start. All right, so there's also a great idea called interval training, and this is something that even people who aren't used to exercising can practice these principles and get quicker, better, faster benefits. What interval training means is that you do a quicker and then slower type of exercise as you're going. So if you're walking, you walk faster for maybe 30 to 45 seconds, and then you go slower for 30 to 45 seconds. And you just kind of, do up and down kind of rhythm, kind of like that. And that actually gets you in better shape and improves your blood pressure, for example, faster, and improves your weight faster. And so that's what this study is talking about. Is they took some people who were sedentary, and then they put them into a study for 10 weeks, and they had half the people, well, a third of the people doing interval training, a third doing continuous training, and a third doing control group. And in fact, my co-author was he was one of the lead executors of this study. And what they found was the following. Well, before I say that, this looks at exactly what they did with this interval training. So they They alternated between 5 beats above their target heart rate and 5 beats below. So you can wear a heart monitor, which they had them wear, and then they looked at how fast their heart rate was beating, and then they had them go a little faster to get their heart rate up, and they had them go slower to let it go down. And so they just basically the patient had control of this, and they just had them go up and down according to their protocol. All right, so this is an example of what they improved. So they got some weight improvements that were significantly more than just your continuous training group. They had about a 5-pound weight loss in 10 weeks as opposed to a 2-pound weight loss, and that was a significant improvement. And that would help your blood pressure as well. So that's a good idea. And then, of course, the thing I do not want to neglect when talking about exercise is the most powerful form of exercise that we haven't even talked about yet. And it's highlighted in this chart a little bit. Um, you can see that as we look at this chart, the blood pressure improvements are the greatest in something called isometric exercise, which we'll touch on a bit, and then also combined. So people who did multiple different forms of exercise. So if you just do endurance exercise, you just walk or you run or you get your heart rate up, that helps. I mean, you get some benefits here, um, you know, but you're not going to have maybe as much benefit as if you combine it. All right, so you've got systolic, diastolic in the total group, and then those who had high blood pressure. You got it. You can see there. All right, so you get this improvement. So let's take a look at isometric exercise for a second. Maybe you don't know what this is. All right, so you all know what these little guys are. These little hand grip exercise machines. Maybe you've seen them around. These aren't my favorite kind. This is a picture I found. But they are there, and they don't really feel that good when you squeeze them. I got one that's much more comfortable. But there's an interesting thing that you can do when you do isometric exercise. And what isometric exercise is that it is where you're pushing against something and actually not moving the muscle. And this is, like we saw in that study, one of the more powerful forms of getting your blood pressure down. It's really fascinating that all you got to do is push your muscles against something and hold it there, and that gets your blood pressure down. It's actually pretty powerful. And so here's kind of a look at the various studies that they looked at, and less than an hour per week, reduce systolic blood pressure by 10 points and diastolic blood pressure by 6.7 points, almost 7 points. These are changes similar to drugs. All right. So, how come we're not prescribing this to everybody? Why do we just talk about lisinopril and those medicines and we don't talk about isometric exercises? They're doable. We can do these. So here's the summary of the studies that they had in this meta-analysis. So the hand grip was popular. That was 3 of them. 2 of them had the double leg extension idea. But I would say any major muscle group, if you engage in isometric exercise, that's where you push in a constant way with force against something and you keep that pressure on without motion of the muscle, the nitric oxide builds up inside the muscle and starts to leak out and begins to lower your blood pressure once it's finished. So they did this for a certain number of weeks, and they did it 3 times a week, and then they had 4 bouts per session. And what they did was they squeezed, let's say that here this one, they squeezed the hand grip for 2 minutes, and then they rested for a minute, and they did that 4 times in their session. All right. And so they did that 3 times a week. That's all they did. 2 minutes, rest a minute, 4 times, 3 times a week. That's it. And they got this level of blood pressure improvement. And so the total exercise time for that particular study was only 30 minutes. Everything here was less than an hour a week. So pretty impressive. Just a little bit of time given. I do this in the car. I just have the thing in my car. I'll do some regular exercises and then I'll just squeeze it and hold it and see if I can hold it for 2 minutes while I'm just sitting there in the car doing nothing else, waiting for the traffic or whatever, waiting for the light to turn. You can get your blood pressure down while you're waiting for the red light instead of it going up. All right, so here's kind of more the statistical piece where this is how they came up with the reduction of 10 points in their blood pressure, and all the studies showed the same. And so this is very impressive to me. And isometric exercise is definitely the way to go. I think it's safe, and it's definitely a very doable thing. Um, Here's the diastolic numbers. Here you can see negative 6.65. And again, when it's pushing this way, you get a negative 10. And here's all the effects that these different studies had. And the summary was that. And so that tells you that this is a solid bit of research. All right. And so we'll press on. So, anyways, nature. Let's get back to nature. We just don't spend enough time in nature. We need to get out into nature more. Here's a beautiful little vegetable garden in someone's backyard. Caught my eye. How many different ways does nature, just maybe even working on this vegetable garden, how many different ways can you think of that can improve your blood pressure? We got sunlight. We've talked about that. The exercise component, such a big piece. What about the relaxation effects of just, enjoying your garden? Maybe this garden's not quite as pretty as this garden. This garden's pretty nice. Just think about how high is your blood pressure going to be when you are enjoying yourself in this garden, for example, the fresh air, the quiet, just the little tiny noises, the little stream, the birds, that is going to improve your blood pressure and make a huge difference for you. And now adding one more component is the exercise. Such a big deal. All right, so nature is a huge thing, and I think God put it in us from the beginning, and He took the first man who was on the earth and put him in the Garden of Eden and told him, you know, take care of this, and so what kind of exercise were they doing? Well, they were doing all sorts of isometric exercises and resistance exercises and you know cardiovascular type exercises as they did their work in the garden. And so I encourage you to consider looking at gardening and different kinds of things outside that are similar to that, that can get you into more natural setting. All right, and sorry we're going a little bit long here. Sleep. Let's just take a quick look at sleep here. Sleeping your way to lower blood pressure. You know what? When you don't get enough sleep, your blood pressure is higher. And your stress hormones the very next day that you went short on sleep are higher. And sleep apnea is an important piece of this for many people, that even though you maybe have gotten 8, 9 hours of sleep, you're still tired because you really didn't get 8, 9 hours of sleep because sleep apnea kept waking you up all night long. And so sleep apnea is, a really important, piece to look at here. And this research study is really interesting, from 2012 in JAMA, where they looked at 21,000 person years, 1,800 people, and what they found was that here's the control group. This is your risk of high blood pressure. So the control group basically had no risk. And then as you got sleep apnea, mildly, the risk started going up, and then severe, starts getting pretty bad, where they're not using CPAP machines, and then they use a CPAP machine, and maybe the blood pressure risk goes down a little bit. I'm sorry, this is non-adherent. They're not using it very well, and then they use it, and then it gets even better. And actually gets better than the controls. And they wondered, well, why is CPAP that good that it's even better than people who didn't have sleep apnea, apparently. But they think that what was actually going on is the control group had some hidden sleep apnea that they just didn't completely tease out, and so that's why this group did better. All right, so why does lack of sleep and poor sleep cause high blood pressure? Well, it's the catecholamines, it's the stress hormones, the adrenaline and norepinephrine, epinephrine, all these different terms that have to do with this kind of fight or flight response within your body, and that raises up your blood pressure and gets your heart racing, so to speak. And even in small doses, it does the same thing. And caffeine, of course, augments and worsens this process. And so that's why we've discouraged caffeine intake. Um, but what do you do when you don't sleep? You take caffeine, right? And so that even makes the issue worse. You've got these cytokines and so on. And when you don't sleep, you don't make melatonin. And melatonin helps you keep your blood pressure down. We know that melatonin helps you reduce your blood pressure. This study showed that immediately after getting a poor night's sleep, so they took 30 volunteers and had, them sleep 4 hours from, um, you know, 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. versus 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. And the ones who only slept 4 hours versus the ones who slept 8 hours had much higher levels of inflammatory chemicals in their blood. They could just check it and know for sure. In fact, we could probably just check how much of these chemicals are in your blood right now and get a sense of how much you slept last night. you know, it's not maybe not that perfect a test, but it did show us that there's a difference, and that's a big deal with these inflammatory chemicals. All right, so melatonin also. So melatonin's important, and you make melatonin only because you're getting enough sleep. But as you get older, your melatonin production tends to go down, and here's a look at that. You can have very high levels as a child, and then it really starts to drop. And then once you hit 50, basically you're at almost nothing, and you just don't have any melatonin production anymore. And it seems like high blood pressure is very much, kind of going up as well. And so there's the hypothesis, well, maybe melatonin production has a role to play. And of course, the more sleep you get because of the area under the curve, if you remember your calculus or your math or whatever, if you ever took any of that, your area under the curve, the more, the longer your sleep, the more you're going to make in terms of melatonin. And, you'll make more melatonin if you turn your lights off, and that's really important. If you have your lights on, you'll make less melatonin while you're sleeping. So if you're staring at a television while you're sleeping, you're not going to make as much melatonin, and that's going to affect your blood pressure. Sleep deprivation. So if you shorten your night, you make this shorter, you're just not going to get as high a curve. Jet lag, aging, obviously are huge factors as well in certain people. And the less melatonin you make, the more you have damage and oxidation and free radicals and all the bad stuff that makes you age. And melatonin is an antioxidant, it's a powerful healing hormone, and we need it in our life. So let's try melatonin supplements. Let's see if that helps some. You know, does it? Well, in fact, it does if it's controlled release. If it's fast release or it just kind of rushes in and comes right out in a couple hours, then it's not it's not effective. But if it kind of goes slowly into your system and kind of hangs out there and then slowly goes down and is kind of going out of your system when you wake up, then you get some blood pressure benefits. In this particular study, you could see that it was about 6 points and 3 points on the diastolic range. So there's something there. But even more powerfully is you can stimulate your own melatonin production through what you do. If you get daily sunshine exposure, maybe 20 minutes out in the sun, for example, that will increase your melatonin production at night. If you, again, sleep in complete darkness, increase your melatonin production. Caffeine, alcohol, and tobacco reduce the amount of melatonin that you make. So again, another reason to skip on caffeine. And then try to get sleep earlier in the night. If you sleep more in harmony with how the day-night cycle is going, if at all possible. Not everybody can do it. We've got shift workers in this world. We've got night workers in this world, and we appreciate the way that they're kind of sacrificing their body for the good of their job and society and so on. But if you can at all possible, if you have the liberty, turn off the television and get to bed 2 hours before midnight or something like that, trying to get more into harmony with nature. And there are drugs, there's a number of drugs that impair melatonin production. People don't realize that. Seems like lately I've had several patients who want to take B12, and it's great to take B12, but, B12, if the dose is too high, um, lowers your melatonin production. So you want to make sure that you don't take more than 3 milligrams a day. So just get one that's like 500 micrograms or 1,000 micrograms. Just faithfully take it, and you should be fine. You can check with your doctor and have them check just to make sure your B12 levels are okay. But you know, if you take too high a dose, like 5,000 micrograms, which is 5 milligrams, you're going to impair your melatonin production, and that's going to be an issue. NSAIDs, so ibuprofen, Aleve, naproxen, et cetera, they do it. Sleep aids, certain kinds of, benzodiazepines like Ativan and Valium and so on, but they do it. Antidepressants have an effect negatively on melatonin. Beta blockers do, calcium channel blockers do. And it's interesting with calcium channel blockers, there's been some huge trials lately that calcium channel blockers, if they're taken, should be taken at night because they actually do at night, lower your risk of death if they're taken at night versus taken during the day. So that's very ironic because they also lower your melatonin production. So if you're on a beta blocker or a calcium channel blocker, just take a melatonin supplement. That's my recommendation. And then don't overeat. You also make melatonin in your gut. Your gut has a powerful mechanism for making melatonin. And so if you eat too much later into the evening, your melatonin production is restricted because your body's digesting, and that melatonin is only made when you're fasting. And so you should be fasting basically when you go lay down to go to sleep. You shouldn't have a full stomach. You should be largely finished your digestion by that time. All right, so that's excellent. And then there's melatonin in the food. Foods that are rich in tryptophan. I'm sorry, there is melatonin in the food, but this is actually just talking about tryptophan. So tryptophan is a precursor of melatonin, and so you want to make sure you're getting tryptophan in your food. And so eat foods rich in tryptophan like tofu, pumpkin, sesame seeds, almonds, walnuts. These are all high in tryptophan. So your seeds and nuts and tofu, basically. And then getting adequate calcium, so green leafy vegetables, of course. Vitamin B6, again, is high in your fruits and vegetables and green leafies. And then, of course, here's the melatonin-rich foods. You've got oats and corn and rice, for example, have lots of melatonin in them, and that will help to make it easier to go to sleep at night. So if you're going to eat a little bit of a meal, try to eat it, 4 hours before bed, maybe at 6 p.m. And if you are, just eat something with a little oats and some fruit, and just call it an evening, and see how you sleep and see if it's a lot better. Okay, but what if you can't sleep despite all that? Well, there's some sleep hygiene principles that we like to follow. So, exercise in the morning, not at night. If you exercise at night, you're going to stimulate yourself a lot, and it's going to be hard to sleep. Get that bright light exposure, light evening meals, we mentioned. Avoid caffeine, avoid alcohol, nicotine, high risk naps. So if you take a long nap during the day, of course, you're going to have trouble sleeping at night. And then have a regularity to your life. Try to go to bed at the same time every night, if at all possible. And then get into a routine. With our kids, we have a routine. They go take a shower, and then we read them stories, and then we have prayer with them. And by that time, they're just like dragon. I mean, you could basically pick them up and put them wherever you want. And sometimes we do if they fall asleep in our bed or whatever when we're reading to them. So it's just the way it goes, and that routine is such a blessing. And try to have a routine yourself. Don't just rush in from work and be like, man, it's late, I worked too late, and then watch your favorite show and then think you're gonna go to sleep and fall asleep. I mean, maybe there's a few people who can do that, but it's a recipe for problems later on. And then prepare for sleep. If you're not mentally in the right place, you've got to get yourself there. You got to get the worries and the anger and the issues, whatever's churning at you. You got to find a way to relax. You can't go to bed when you're stressed. You got to figure it out and find a way if you're relaxed. So um, everybody's a little different on how they do that, but you got to find a healthy way to do that. Hopefully it's not unhealthy. And then refocusing your brain, of course. Um, you know, don't think about all the problems. Write down things you got to get done. and then leave it aside. You can't do anything about it while you're sleeping, and try to get your brain on relaxing things, thinking about things that calm you down and get you relaxed. And then, of course, the screens. Screens have been just absolutely just coming into our world so fast. And the kids and teenagers have these habits of just being on the screens, like, all night. And the adults are starting to do it as well, right? And it's becoming a bad habit, and it's affecting sleep, and that's just going to set us up for all sorts of dangerous medical conditions, including high blood pressure. So, we mentioned going to bed early, and then the alarm clock. You can use it, but if it gives you anxiety, try maybe to not use it, and just see if you can get into such a routine that you just wake up. Restful surroundings, obviously important. Comfortable bed. And if you can't still, after all that, you still can't sleep, don't lay in bed longer than 20 minutes, about. And if you still can't sleep longer, at 20 minutes, then get up and do something that's non-stimulating. Just stretch a little bit, maybe march in place real slowly. You might want to listen to some relaxing music, maybe if you can, put on some headphones if there's other people in the house, and just try to find a way to relax yourself, without stimulating yourself too much. Ideally, without turning the lights on, would be best. All right, and then finally, our final thing is rest and blood pressure, related to a weekly rest. Could blood pressure benefit this kind of weekly day of rest that many people don't get? And so there's the whole issue of the Asian culture and Japanese, for example, where they just don't ever rest. They work 7 days a week so often, and the long working hours are associated with high blood pressure, higher levels of cortisol and epinephrine, work stress. They have a name even for people who die from overwork. It's called karoshi. And, you know, um, most of these folks work so hard, and their blood pressure gets so out of control that they die from a stroke, 60% of them. And there's this job strain. Not only it raises your blood pressure, but it causes your platelets and your blood to get cloggy and starts to clog. And these people have strokes. And so, also, an interesting thing in their culture, and we have this here a little bit, is some holidays paradoxically increase the risk of death from heart attack and stroke. And so, the time off thing needs to be time off and true rest, and not getting in fights with the family or overeating, like we like to do on some of these holidays. All right, and then death restaurant, holy day and Sabbath effects in Jewish mortality in Israel. This is an interesting research study from the Social Science and Medicine Journal, where they went to Israel and they looked at what kind of death rates people had on regular days versus their holy days and their Sabbath rest days. And they found some really interesting things. In the Jewish culture, they have these holy days, and Saturday is a national day of rest for every week. They rest. And so it's actually against the law to work. And, as a consequence, from early afternoon on Friday to, the next evening, the businesses, services, public transportation closed down. And, you know, this is for everybody. And so the findings were as follows: for all men and for younger women, there was a clear and significant dip peak pattern in the number of deaths around the Sabbath, Saturday, but no consistent dip peak pattern around other holy days. This pattern was found for all causes of death, but particularly cerebrovascular causes, that's stroke, was stronger for men than for women, and was not found among young Jewish children or among the non-Jewish population. All right, so the conclusion then was that if the essence of a holy day is that it is differentiated from a mundane rest of the week, then Saturday in Israel is a holy day par excellence. Indeed, by Jewish tradition, the Sabbath is the most important festivity in the Jewish year. And so there's something about rest in general, getting at least a week, a day a week of rest in your life. And then if it has a greater meaning to you, perhaps it has even more benefit in terms of risk of stroke. And the interesting thing about this is that's true for this particular study. Let me read this here. Deaths occur on Saturdays, of course, just as they do on any other day of the week. Nonetheless, the sacred nature of the Sabbath, it's being set apart from all the mundane work days of the week, creates a special situation in which the probability of death is reduced. We have argued that this special nature derives not from what the Sabbath is not, a work day, but from what it is. And so there's just an interesting phenomenon there where they found that only those people who believed in the special nature of this holy day that the Jewish people have actually had the benefits in terms of mortality. The non-believers who had to follow the Sabbath because it's the rule of the nation, they did not have that dip peak pattern in like the Jewish population did. And so there was something special about that. And so, this is another look at that from a nursing journal, and they noticed that a Sabbath type practice improved many parts of people's lives, not just necessarily health aspects, but also enhancing self-awareness, improving self-care, enriching relationships, helping spirituality, helping, you know, the rest of their week. They just had a better week because they practiced the Sabbath idea and made a difference. All right, so that was our look at things. I'm sorry it went a little bit long this time. That was 4 sessions that we jumped through.